a Build Hatch developed production.
Hello, I'm Aaron Kyle and welcome to another episode of Build Hatch. On this week's episode of Build Hatch, I had the opportunity to sit down with Ben and Dave from Urban Joinery. These guys are a great combination, and on this week's episode, you'll get to hear about the very intricate world of designing and constructing joinery in the built environment. Being a finishing trade, I'm always interested to know how these guys juggle the balancing act of meeting client deadlines and the pressure, since joinery is one of those final trades in most construction projects. Ben and Dave run a really successful business, so it was really nice to see how relaxed, yet their attention to detail is second to none. So let's get into it. Ben and Dave from Urban Joinery, welcome to Build Hatch.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having us.
That's okay. Now, I'm really looking forward to this one because you guys are actually our first joinery guys on the show. So it's always good to get a different perspective, and particularly from the finishing trades that come to sight at the later end of the job. So this one should be a good one. So before we hear more about Urban Joinery, where did you guys grow up?
I'm a country boy. I was born in Yass.
Yass.
Yeah.
Yass is a great part of the world.
Oh, it's beautiful there.
Yeah.
I don't remember a lot. My father was a school teacher. Was born in Yass, raised in Junee, which is, where Laurie Daly's from, and Gilchrist. Adam Gilchrist.
So Adam Gilchrist, great cricketer, Australian
We used to
player.
play backyard cricket with him.
Really?
His father was a school teacher as well with my dad. So I grew up in that little country town and little railway town, farming community, and moved to Newcastle when I was 17. So I've been living here, the last 30-something years, 35 years or whatever. So
Yass is great because you always stopped at Yass between Melbourne and Sydney. So that wonderful drive, the big long drive. Obviously, there's a bypass there that's been there for a while now, but I used to always love stopping at Yass. It was one of those places you could grab a pie at the local bakery, fuel up, and then keep going.
Yeah, it's got a beautiful main street with big old buildings with big awnings. It's great, yeah.
And what brought you to Newcastle?
My dad was a school teacher, and I was one of 5 kids. We were about to enter the workforce or university, and the town we were living in was so small, So Dad moved up to Newcastle because it gave us both tertiary education options and job options.
And what about you, Ben?
Yeah, I was Sydney born, moved up here when I was about 10 and have been here ever since. Yeah, lived out in the Cardiff area, not too far from the lake, so that was growing up out there, just with mates, always outside, usual sort of lifestyle, I guess.
Now, what got you guys into becoming a joiner? Like, did you guys sort of set out to become joiners straight out of school?
I didn't at all. I went to university. I'd sort of grown up in the country, and there was this, I don't know, I was enamoured by the surfing lifestyle, I think. And when I moved to Newcastle, I was in year 11 and 12, and having a school teacher father, I had to be studious and stuff like that. So when I finished year 12, I really sort of embraced surfing and started going to uni, but quickly surfing became more important and uni became a distraction, to which point, I sort of had a rethink about what I wanted to do. And while I made my mind up, I just surfed for about a year. And I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. And then sort of,
So what were you studying at uni?
I was studying biological sciences.
Wow.
Like I really wanted to be work for Parks and Wildlife, be a ranger, something like that. Zoology, I was incredibly interested in birds and stuff like that.
Yeah, fascinating.
And and it was sort of old enough that it was sort of environmental science was a brand new field, you know what I mean? Like there wasn't even a subject at uni called environmental science. It was a new emerging field. I was sort of interested in that. But like I said, I got distracted by other things.
So you went and found yourself surfing?
I don't know if I found myself or lost myself, but I surfed anyway. And I was quite unsure about what I wanted to do. And then one day I sort of realised I think I'd like to be a builder, you know what I mean? And went and got a job working with a builder, but ended up in joinery, you know what I mean? And hadn't thought about it. But when I started doing it, I found that my brain worked that way, like detail to the millimetre stuff and fine workmanship, that sort of thing appealed to me. And I found that joinery worked for my brain, you know what I mean? And it was a good fit for me. And I've been doing that for the last 33 years.
And you love it. And I can see your eyes light up there. And what about you, Ben? Like, how did you get into construction?
Yeah, I finished school in year 10 and decided that school wasn't for me. So I went hunting an apprenticeship, and it was either carpentry or joinery. I just happened to fall into joinery. I landed a job making solid timber doors and windows. So I did that traditional style joinery and absolutely loved it.
And how did you guys meet?
Yeah, so I took a bit of time out from the joinery side of things due to a bit of a health issue. And in that time, I did some sales. So I was a sales rep for one of the joinery supply mobs. Happened to come across Dave and as one of my clients at the time, and he was not long gone out on his own.
I was leading hand at another place, but Ben used to call in. I used to deal with a lot of the reps. Yeah, Ben was just he wasn't your stock standard rep. He was sort of a pretty cool rep, and we got on well. You know what I mean?
I'll fix you up later for saying that. That's right.
Yeah. A few years later, when I went out on my own, I sort of heard that Ben had gone out on his own. You know what I mean? I was running a business from home, which is, good to start with, but as soon as, you start getting bigger and busier, it becomes hard working from home because you really want to keep the two separate, I think, work life and home life.
Which is a hard thing to do, isn't it?
Well, you end up working too much. You work too much when you're at home, I think, because you're always just got one more thing to do and just popping back out to the shed, to do some more after dinner out at the shed doing some more work. I got to the stage where I needed to move out of home, the business really, into a shed, and I was looking for someone to share a shed with because it was a big step and I was really sort of nervous about it. And I sort of knew Ben was working from home. I sort of approached Ben.
It's pretty funny. There was three of us. Three of us moved into one shed and shared the space. I think Dave found it, conned the other bloke into moving in. He was doing some work for me as a subby, and basically he'd just say to me, "Mate, you've run out of space. You're going to have to move in with us. We've got space." So we all three of us ended up working three separate businesses out of one shed. It's worked out well.
Yeah, makes sense and helps keep the costs down too.
Yeah.
Big time.
Not that that's what you were looking at doing back then, of course.
I was definitely looking to keep the costs down. It was just that next step, which, each sort of step along the way, when you're starting out, every step's a big step, you know what I mean? And you're really sort of nervous about how it's going to go and where the money's going to come from. And then, years down the track, you'll look back retrospectively and just laugh at how easy it was and how much you were sweating over nothing, you know what I mean?
And wish your bills were only that size now.
Yeah.
So you started off with the shed. Back then you were looking at combining spaces more than anything, but still working separately.
Yeah. What was it, about 3 years we shared that shed for? I think the three of us were in there for about 12 or 18 months, and the other guy sort of cottoned on that all his work was coming from Dave or I and didn't need to pay a third of the shed. So he sort of bailed out. So it was left as just the two of us. Yeah, we sort of watched each other work over that time and sort of identified that Dave's strengths were different to my strengths, and maybe as we grew in size, we needed more people, but maybe a good way to start was to join forces, I suppose, and do it that way.
Yeah, and I mean, it was funny. I was a one-man show and had really no desire to have anyone work for me because I still like to go surfing when I wanted to go surfing. Just, sharing that space with Ben, we realised that we had the same work ethic, which is really important. I'd be going in early and Ben would already be in there, you know what I mean? Or I'd be working back late, Ben would be working back late. We just had like Benny said, we had the same work ethic, but we had sort of our skill set that differed, that meshed well together. We probably talked about it for a couple of years before we did it, and at different times we sort of approached it and it wasn't right for the other person, but it was just an evolving sort of thing, and my jobs were getting bigger and bigger and more complex, and I always needed a hand. Same thing was happening with Ben.
We did a couple of jobs together
Yeah.
along the way.
So you can straight away start to see it evolving and thinking, well, we've shared the same space for a while. We're starting to work well together. And
yeah, well, we got on well. There was never any arguments. We had, similar ideas about a lot of things and similar goals, I suppose. Benny was probably, I don't know, a bit more progressive than I was. I suppose it came to the realisation that the work that really interests me is the architectural stuff there, where you're building challenging projects. I get my satisfaction from doing, not doing run-of-the-mill stuff, doing harder stuff. I had a timber background as well, same as Benny, and I realised that to work in that market, it's really difficult to do that well as a one-man show because your deadlines are... It's hard to meet deadlines on a big house fit out if it's one guy doing it, you know what I mean? And I sort of realised I do really, to do what I want to do, there's going to need to be other people involved. I did like the idea of being a one-man show, but I realised, with some of the good builders that I was starting to do work for, you really only get one opportunity to impress them. And they're either going to come back to you or they're never going to use you again, sort of thing. And everyone runs on a deadline, you know what I mean? And to meet those deadlines, really, you need hands on deck to help out.
you touched on a really good point there, and being a finishing trade is always a challenging task and a challenging role. What you mentioned just then about being a joiner, you really only get one shot. And that extends not only to the builder, but the client as well. Because I guess from a builder's perspective, if you want to sort of trial or use a particular trade or pick a chippy as an example, if the frame's out a little bit and your plasterers are giving a bit of feedback saying, look, your chippy didn't do a good job on the frame and I had to straighten things up, or the plasterer charged me extra money, whatever it was, you can fix that. But when you're dealing with a joinery trade, such as your work, your product it has to be perfect. If it's not, it's very difficult to fix it. And those impressions count. And they're what the client sees and sits at the table every night and looks at, or uses that bathroom 20 times a day or whatever it might be. So it's very important, isn't it?
Very important, yeah. You really do only get one shot. Otherwise, you could be remaking a whole lot of stuff.
That's right. And joinery's not an easy bit of furniture that you can modify easily or fix. It's usually replacement.
A lot of the time it is replacement, yeah. You can sometimes try and fix it, but what you find is the amount of time you spend trying to fix it, you might as well just straight up replace it.
What's your favourite part of the job? I mean, Dave, you were mentioning before about the finishing and the finer details. What's it like? I'd imagine it's quite exciting being able to take some client's imagination or a designer's imagination and kind of work with the client, what they want, and talk about the finishes and things like that.
Yeah, look, it is that. I mean, seeing a finished job is always exciting, and when you do a reno and you've got the before and after, it's great to see what the difference is. In a new build, it's nice to see, let's say it's an architectural job, it's nice to see the architect's plans come to life and know that, all right, the architect drew it, but we actually built it, we made it happen. We put the finishing touches on it and it looks exactly like his 3D image. That's sort of special, I suppose, and I think that's what I get my kicks out of in the game. It's when I wasn't in joinery, it's what I missed, seeing what you'd produce for the day or over a week or over a month or however long it took you to do the job. Not seeing that, I just totally missed it.
What's it like managing you guys are always copping the brunt of the end of the job, the pressures of time. I reckon you guys feel the heat the most, either from the client or the builder. Not blaming you guys, but you guys are the last ones, one of the last ones in.
Yeah, we cop it a little bit. I suppose by the time we get there, if the builder's running late, the heat's on us to get the job finished, and by that time the client's really keen to get in there. So you've just got to try and manage it as best you can. I think communication's a key, just being upfront and honest, and you don't want to put the builder in a bad spot. So you just got to try and manage that the best that you can.
Yeah, I know a couple of builders, and we have this joke quite a bit about they've only sort of got the job if they've managed to agree to finish before Christmas. They only ever do one job where they agree to do the job by Christmas, because if you commit to anything in end of November, early December, you're asking for a lot of heat from the clients or the builder, because it's not going to happen. Things happen, things move. You can only do so much because your suppliers, the third-party suppliers, the door manufacturers, things like that, like how often they'll send an email out to you guys in October and say, our last order is 31st of October or 6th of November, whatever the date might be. So you can only do so much, can't you?
Yeah, you can. I mean, this year was a classic example. We had hardware issues this year. One of our suppliers, all of Bloom Australia basically, so all our drawer and hinge hardware, they were just completely out of stock, and they still are, and we're still waiting for drawer hardware to finish jobs from last year. So
wow.
It's and we're not the only ones. Like, that's across the board, across the country, everywhere.
So what do you do there? Like, they're sitting there waiting?
That's all we can do. Yeah. I mean, we just had to get in as much as we could to try and get people operational, and we've just got a whole heap of parts out there that we're waiting for the balance so we can go and finish it all off. And thankfully, most of our clients have been understanding, and there wasn't too many critical jobs that we weren't able to finish or get to a point that we had to. Yeah, we got out of trouble that way. But it could have been a real nightmare, and probably for some it has been and is. Yeah.
Now, with joinery guys such as yourself, and we're recording this in your Newcastle factory and your headquarters, and the background noise, that just reminded me then, you guys have such a heavy outlay. Pick a carpenter, I'm not picking on carpenters, or pick a painter, any trade, like general tools, you think a couple of $1,000, maybe a little bit more, but you guys have to invest a lot of money in having the right tools for your job. It's a bit of a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it's not something that you can very easily just go out and buy straight up. It takes time to accumulate all that stuff, and we sort of joke when we were in our old shed, we were never getting a CNC. We weren't going to ever do that. Dave was dead against it, and I thought, oh, right, I'll just roll with that for a while. And we got to a stage when we just moved in here, and we were really struggling to find trades that were qualified and actually tradesmen.
So can you explain that to the people listening to this? Like, CNC router, explain the benefits or why that's a challenge and how much they cost.
Oh, look, they probably range in price from a cheap imported Chinese one for, I don't know, 50, 60 grand right through to, people spend $1 million on them for a full setup, full operated workshop setup. They just cut your cutting time down by ridiculous amounts. Like I said, we couldn't get a tradie, and I thought, all right, let's buy a machine, and instead of having a guy on a saw all day, we'll run a CNC, and I reckon the output's about 5 times what a guy can do in a day.
Yeah, so it's basically set up with jigs and tools to be able to cut things without having to get your tape measure out and measure. You're able,
Yeah, you basically just program it all into a computer and send the program to the machine. And our machine holds a whole heap of different tools and drills. And we'll just go around, drill the holes where you tell it to drill the holes, and cut what needs to be cut. Yeah, you lay a sheet on the table and press the button. 5 minutes later, all your bits and pieces are cut out and ready for you at the other end.
To give an idea, I think when we were cutting out by hand, I used to do a lot of the cutting out because we were at that stage where we were still hands-on a lot of the work. Because I've got 30 years experience, I'm used to cutting kitchens out and, quickly looking at a cutting list and working out how many rips I need and blah, blah, blah. And it could do it a lot quicker than the other guys. What used to take me, a solid 10-hour day to do in cutting your board out, putting it through the edger, marking all the ends out, boring holes, doing everything that we need. would take 10 hours. I think now that, the CNC, we get our first year apprentice to run it after it's been programmed. He puts a sheet on, it cuts that sheet off, it pushes that sheet off the end of the table. He puts another sheet on. The first sheet's now been cut and bored already. And while the machine's cutting the second sheet, he puts the first sheet through the edger. I reckon it's taken it from 10 hours down to 2. Like, it's that big a saving.
Yeah, that's very significant, isn't it?
To the point now, I still can't imagine life without a CNC. And I didn't want to get one because I'm computer illiterate and they scare me, computers in general. I do not know how we would function without one.
Oh, we'd be lost.
I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to go back.
No, I couldn't go back.
But the outlay, as you were saying before, we've spent hundreds of thousands out there. I mean, that CNC, I was able to buy a house back before house prices were outrageous. That CNC is as much as I paid for my house. When I bought my house, I was sweating bricks being in debt for that much money. But by the time we got to buying that CNC, we'd bought a whole heap of machines before and, I was used to now not sweating so much. Let's just get it. We'll work it out.
So you'd been building up to that.
Yeah. We have spent hundreds of thousands.
And we're only a small shop too. Like there's guys that are
There's guys that would laugh at our setups. Yeah. And I get slightly offended at times when, if someone sort of has a go at maybe how expensive the joinery is or something. I feel like saying, come over to the shed and see how much money I've spent setting up. And when you consider, what you pay an electrician or a plumber an hour and what you pay us, it's not much different, but our overheads way outweigh anything a plumber or an electrician would ever be paying.
Well, straight up, I mean, as well as the tools, there's office space and factory space. I mean, you guys need space to be able to not only breathe, but work in, and you have to store all the completed products as well. So that's what I mean. It's such a top-heavy trade that you have to invest so much into technology, tools, storage, systems.
You do. Like I said before, the area of work that interests us is the architectural end, where the projects are challenging and there's nothing comes off a cookie cutter. Everything's custom, and every job has its unique set of problems that you have to overcome. And if you want to play in that market, your clients are spending a lot of money, and you've got to show that you're someone they can trust putting that big an investment in. You know what I mean? You can't have them show up, take them to your house where you've got a double garage and you're doing stuff with a router and a power saw. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to play with the big boys, you've got to spend the money. You know what I mean? Like I said, at one stage it was scary. Nowadays it's less so. You know what I mean?
Like you said, you have to crawl before you can walk, and then walk before you run. So unless you're well cashed up or you have backing or support, if you want to be a joiner or a cabinet maker, you start off small and grow and evolve, and eventually you get there after a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
It's not an overnight success story.
No, not always. But that's life really, isn't it? You've got to, anything you do, you've got to walk or crawl before you walk and work your way through it. And, it's as scary as some of those steps were. I think your circumstances change along the way as well. So it kind of adds to helping with some of those dilemmas, I guess.
I sort of think you can't shortcut that process, you know what I mean? Like, the process is, if you want to do well at something, you've got to put in the time and effort, you know what I mean? And I remember when I was working for other people, you don't see that side of the business. You just think they're making a lot of money and you're making it all for them, and you don't realise what's going on behind the scenes and how much hard work goes in there. But I think, if you're willing to put the work in, and if you have I think you've got to have a high standard. In joinery, you need to definitely have a high standard of workmanship or a high standard of excellence. And I think if you don't cheat the system, you put the yards in, you work hard, you can build a name for yourself, you know what I mean?
How do you guys quote things? I mean, if you're a painter and you look at the plans and elevations and you can quote a certain square metre rate and know how much the job's going to charge, with joinery, you have so many different materials and so many different on-site conditions and finishes, and like putting it together with different drawer fronts, and some cabinet might have more cupboards in it, and all these different aspects. There's so many ingredients that go into the pot to be able to spit out an end product. So how do you deal with that?
It just takes a bit of time to get used to what you're looking at, I suppose. I do a lot of the quoting for our jobs, and I know what to look for, and I know how to quote things now, but I break everything down basically to every piece of hardware that we've got in there.
So every single job knob, drawer front.
Yep, I break it right down and quote absolutely everything to every finish that's specified in the job.
That's probably the easier part of the quoting process, because everything's quantifiable, you know what I mean? The hardest aspect, I think, is really trying to foresee how much time that's going to take, you know what I mean? Because
you've got the time here in your factory, and then there's delivery and drop off, and then putting it together at the other end.
Install time, assembly time, headache time. You know, a lot of the work we do isn't straightforward, so it's trying to quantify the labour hours to that. You know, it's how long is a curved bench going to take us to make exactly? Like it's a bit of an unknown sometimes. You know, we've got one out there at the moment that didn't go to plan, so we've had a couple of attempts. So
yeah, we're up to attempt 3.
Yeah, just because it was a tricky setup. So yeah, just trying to quantify the hours is the hardest part.
Yep. Because it's so labour intensive.
Yep.
Your world.
Yep.
Absolutely. It's labour intensive, and as you do bigger and bigger jobs, you know, and you become more and more experienced, you can see a problem on a plan, you know what I mean? Problems become apparent to you, and, you know, usually there's a range of solutions, but Ben can see them on the plan, you know what I mean? Like you said, just trying to work out how long a job's going to take. I could nearly 100% of the time, it'll take longer than what we thought it would. Rarely do the words, gee, that was easier than I thought it was going to be. Rarely does that get said. How easy was that?
Yeah, walk in the park.
What easy money that was.
Well, I mean, we've made a lot of mistakes along the way that have at times hurt when you've had to just keep going and know that you're working for no dollars, but you've got to get the job finished. What do you do?
Well,
it's a learning lesson.
That's right. And I think you need to have that as part of your makeup and who you are as a person, to be in your part of the industry. I mean, if you wanted to do something easy, there's so many other, you could be making door and windows, you know, to try and pick something that involves a similar environment and, you know, being a factory. But you guys like the challenge, and that aspect is probably equally as important to making, you know, $1 and being able to run a business the way you guys do, not just pleasing the client, but pleasing yourselves and thinking at the end of the day, oh, I know that curved bench took 3 goes, but now we've nailed it. We know what to do next time. So if it's in trend or someone wants you to do it, then you've done it before.
Yeah, you've got to look at it like that. How else do you look at it?
Justify.
Yeah, it's look, I think when we both started out, we didn't just want to settle for mediocre, and I think we've both got a high standard, and so sometimes we just have to do what it takes, and we'll do what it takes to make sure the job's right. If that means we've got to pull a couple of panels out and get them redone, well, that's what we do. Or if we've got to rebuild something, well, we'll rebuild it. We both know that it's our name that goes on this job, and more so now it's the Urban Joinery name that goes on it. But when early days, when it's just us, it's our name that went on it. So we were very particular about how it looked. We did, didn't we? We just sometimes did what it takes.
I used to ask myself, and I'm sure a lot of people do this, would I have that in my own home? You know what I mean? And
it's a good measuring stick, isn't it?
And I know what it's like. If I do something at my house, if there's a little defect in what I've done there, and it's pretty invisible to most people, I will look at it every day. Every day I'll walk out, look at that island bench and look at the defect that only I know about, but it bugs me so much. And That's what we try to teach our guys. Would you have that in your house? If the answer to that is yes, and it's a pretty substandard piece of work you've just done, then you need to ask the question, would Dave or Ben have that in his house, you know? And the answer is definitely no. The market that we enjoy working in, you've got to have an extremely high standard. I think the people that employ us are spending a lot of money and they deserve 110% effort. You have to produce as close to perfection as what you can, you know what I mean? And that's what we're striving for. And you can never get perfect. Getting perfection costs a lot of money, you know what I mean? But you go for as close as you can to it. If you do what's right by your own standards and, you know, do what's right by your client, at the end of the day, they'll be happy with the money they've spent, you know what I mean? And they'll recommend you to someone else. And really our market is built on word of mouth and referrals, you know what I mean? So it's really important. Joinery, if you can't be bothered doing a really good job, you shouldn't be in joinery at all. Joinery, you know, I'm interested in half-millimetres, you know what I mean? That's the joinery game.
The eye for detail.
Yeah.
What's the most challenging job? And you've thought, how are we going to be able to do this? And you've managed to work it out?
Oh, there's been a few. There's some I'd rather not remember. But
Beach Street was challenging, yeah, because of the limitations of the product that was spec'd up by the architect. We tried hard to get that spec changed. Ben ran into a bit of trouble with the rep from that company that had worked hard to get their product spec'd on the job, and we were working hard to get it off. That was difficult. A lot of our jobs are difficult. When I used to do the quoting and I was a one-man show, I would spend way too much time trying to work out exactly how I was going to do a job so that I could price it. I've learnt now not to sweat things.
Don't sweat the small stuff.
And don't sweat stuff that you don't need to sweat about yet. You can sweat about that later. Quite often, you know, we'll be looking at a set of plans and it's like, how are we going to do this? I don't know. We'll work it out when the time comes. Let's allow this much labour for it. And then when the time comes, you get your trusted guys and you say, right, this is what we've got to do. How are we going to do it? And you start brainstorming it and you solve it. And you find a way. But there's a lot of jobs that we do that are difficult. Architects, some of their favourite mechanisms they like to use is sky hooks and anti-gravitational paint. So there's things that it's like, what's holding that up? You know, they have these great concepts and it's like, oh, okay, you know, unless we can use the sky hook and it's going to be difficult. But you work them out. And I think really that's the appeal of the job for us, you know what I mean?
yeah, problem solving really, isn't it? Like it's, you know, at the end of the day, we're going into people's homes and they've got a problem because they've got this empty space that needs storage and something that looks nice. And our job's to solve that with something that looks nice and some storage and, you know, something that has its own little edge to it that can't just buy off the shelf, I suppose.
Yeah, look, I really like that. And I think it's easy for people looking from the outside. If you're in the construction industry and you've got a business, it's very easy to look at things from an easy angle and think, okay, if we turn over $2 million and we're making 20% margin, even if we shrink that down to 15 and allow a little bit of fat there, it doesn't actually work like that. And people listening to this need to understand you have hardworking people like you guys that work in our construction industry who you just want to do a good job and you'll make it happen. You're not pricing it for every single square metre, but just having the passion and the foresight and the experience and the love of the job as well to be able to say, all right, with my bit of experience, I'll allocate a certain amount of that. But that's just for you to say, we'll revisit that, but we'll get the job done. And so that's an amazing attitude to be able to have that commitment and level of passion for the job just to get it for the end user in mind. So it's really important.
It is important. And I think it's gone a long way to making our business what it is today, really. Probably wouldn't have done half the jobs we've done if we didn't tackle things with that attitude, I suppose.
And you're not measuring it from a return on investment in dollars or cents. You're looking at from, I just want to do the job and make it work and impress the client, do a good job for that architect. And like you said, I say it every single week, but word of mouth referrals, it's such a huge way of referral and getting work.
Yeah, it is. And it's been our only way to get work up until probably, I guess, the start of COVID last year. We sort of launched a website and got serious on Instagram. But before that, it was really word of mouth. That's where our work came from.
Do you guys predominantly do work that's designed by architects and you've got the plans, or how much of your work's actually you guys putting something together in your workshop to show them?
The majority was architectural, but I think now, and probably from that same time period of the start of COVID, we also employed a designer, but off the back of Instagram and the website, we get a lot more renovation work. Therefore, we do a lot more of our own design. We've always done our own design, just not as much as probably what we do now.
Would you call it 50-50 maybe now?
Now it would probably be 50-50.
Yeah, look, I know a lot of architects, obviously, and even going back as recent as 2 years ago, a lot of their work when it came to joinery was they would put that in as an option and they would do that as part of their fee. Whereas now they're kind of doing, I wouldn't say concept, because concept by definition wouldn't be accurate, but they may do a little bit. And then I think most people, even a client on a new build, except for maybe high end or high volume jobs, it's more or less indicating, here's what I want, and they'll put some images from Instagram, and it's over to you guys to finish the last 20% of coming up with what they want based on that. So, and I think that's an efficient model as well.
Yeah, I think it works. I mean, it gives us a chance to really stamp our mark on it without completely destroying the architect's ideas or the client's ideas. But it also allows us to be more cost efficient, I suppose. We can really recommend, all right, well, you want to do this is the best product for that, or let's not do it that way because it's going to be really heavy on price. If we do it like this, we can save you a few dollars and or have you seen this new product? So we get a chance to offer some of our advice and options in there, I suppose, by doing it that way.
I really love working with architects, and I think they're good conceptually, and really they have to know a lot of general information on about everything, but they don't know as much about joinery as we do, you know what I mean? So I think it's a clever architect that will do concepts and then involve the joiner, because it's our game. We know the game better than they do. We know what products are there, and we know how they work, when to use a certain mechanism in a certain place. You know what I mean? I think it's good when the door's left open for us to at least advise on.
Yeah, to get in early. And I, as I said, I think it's an efficient model where you involve you guys in the early stages of the job, and particularly with budgets, because as we've talked about, joinery can cost a lot of money.
Yes, and joinery's at the end, and their cost blowouts are usually coming out of the ground, or usually by the time we get on board, there'll be budget cuts, like is often.
Yeah,
we don't
that's
have
where
that
the
much
tension
money
is
anymore.
at that end of the job.
Yep. And it's difficult.
So we've already heard from you, Dave, with you love to surf when you're not working. So what about you, Ben? What do you like to do when you're not working?
Yeah, surf as well. Or fish, or water ski, or anything water sports, I suppose, really. Otherwise,
it's good for the soul.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a fairly young family still, so time with them is always good as well.
Benny and I work way too hard for the money we earn, you know what I mean? Like we work long hours and we work too hard. Something has to give so surfing, I don't get to surf as much anymore. We're hoping to claw it back, you know what I mean? We're hoping to get our business running in a way where, we can sort of get out in the water a bit more than we do at the moment. But, I think there's any small business owners in the same position as us. We all work too hard for what we have to do, for the money we get.
And what about looking into the future? Like, what are you guys looking forward to most, I guess, looking forward?
I don't think we're fully hit our straps yet as a business. We've got a lot of growth still to go through, and I think we've got some exciting times ahead. I think this year's shaping up as a good year in the industry. We've got a fair bit of work that we're started working on now for the year. We've got some plans sort of in the background there of a few different ideas and a few new little directions that we want to take as well, and a few new little products that we'd like to get into the market just to get just something a little bit different. And obviously, as you can see, we're turning this space into a new office, so we'll have a new office and a bit of a showroom in the near future, which will be great, and I think will really add to our business. So it's exciting, yeah.
Look, I really love that, and I say to a lot of people, I mean, there's never ever a perfect end product, and setting up a factory, I mean, everyone would love to have a showroom from day one, but I love how you guys have gone in here into this space, and you're growing and evolving, and there's a space over here, and you're nice enough to show me through your factory before, and yeah, you can see you're building up to it, and I think that's very important for people listening to this. There's never a perfect goal. It's evolving and getting there.
Yeah, it really is all about the journey. You know what I mean? Like evolving, growing. I think it's funny when you start working for yourself. You have this, you have this great passion for your. We're tradies. You know what I mean? We're good craftsmen, and then you get involved in a business. What do I know about business? Nothing. You know what I mean? And it's really, I find it a very difficult process. Business, and I'm lucky to have Ben, because Ben's way more progressive than I am. But I find the challenge is the business side of things, and Benny's been working very hard to get the front end of our business to match the back end of our business, because I think we have a very good product, and we want the whole front end, the whole quoting, the whole process of meeting with the client and talking to clients and talking. I think, we want to bring that up to match the back end, and Benny's been working really hard at that, and I suppose we're lucky enough to be putting together some good people in our that work for us now, which is really exciting. I agree with Benny. I think, I would love to have that name where, when, you have architects and clients getting together and they're going to build something beautiful and expensive, where they would say, look, talk to Urban Joinery, they're the only guys you want to have on site. You know what I mean? That's where I'd like to be headed, where our name is synonymous with high quality and 100% satisfaction. That's what I'd like to do, build a good reputation, have good guys working for me, and be involved in great projects, working with other good trades, good builders. We love working with good builders, you know what I mean? It's a pleasure to work with them, and we're sort of lucky as well. A lot of our clients are just lovely people, lovely people. It's funny, you were talking before about meeting deadlines and stuff like that. There has been occasions in the past where we have had clients in tears because they're moving in on the weekend and the job's not finished. And but if you do a very good job and it's delivered a week late or something like that, it's like having a baby that the pain's forgotten about because you have this beautiful thing in the end. You know what I mean? Like yeah. And usually our clients are very gracious with us.
And I can see why you love coming to work every day working with a character like Dave.
Yep. That's exactly why I like coming to work. Yep.
So if people listening to this want to get into contact with you guys, what's the best way to go about it?
Probably just jump on the website or
check out your Instagram page.
Check
Lots
out
of
Instagram.
Cool images
you can
on
contact us through that. Contact us on the website. Yeah, that'd be the best way for sure.
Oh, well, this has been very enjoyable, and I love what you guys are doing here in this space, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it evolve into the future. So, Dave and Ben from Urban Joinery, thank you for coming on to Build Hatch. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. It's great.
Well, that was another Build Hatch episode with Ben and Dave from Urban Joinery. I really like their story of how they teamed up together and built their business from the ground up, constantly growing as people and business owners. What a really great story. As usual, please check out our Instagram and other socials where you'll be able to learn more about our guests and the features of the work that we talk about. And please rate our show. It means a lot. The more people that hear these inspiring stories, the better for everyone. Have a great week, and you'll hear me again on the airwaves next week. Thanks for listening to another episode of Build Hatch.
You have experienced a Build Hatch developed production.